Question.
Mr. Krauthammer, I feel confident, like you do, that the Republicans will win the next presidential election. We should have won it this time, but next time we will for sure. In the meantime, do you think it's a likely scenario that Obama has in his mind the fond hope that he can get someone elected on the Democrat side like Biden or someone like him, clueless, that he can exert great influence on and continue his programs down the slippery slope to socialism?
I would just caution you about using the word socialism. The reason is it's too broad a term. It encompasses all kinds of socialism, including the nasty totalitarian examples, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, Cuba, Korea. I just would caution you to use the word social democrat, because that's what he is. He's not somebody who imagines, he's not an acolyte of the Communist Manifesto. He is in the tradition of the quite remarkable and respectable social democrats in Europe. Labor Party, I think, would be a good example, a good counterpart. So I'm just a little wary about using that. I think he ought to identify him as somebody whose ideal is a society more European, which he sees as a more just society where there's less inequality. So I think we ought to give him the kind of respect for his ideology that he denies our side in looking at our ideology and the set of ideas that we believe in. But will he try to choose a successor? I don't know. Some presidents are intent on doing that, and some are less interested. I think Obama, just seeing what he's doing, I think he thinks that he sees himself as a Reagan-like president. And I quoted in my column this morning a statement he made in 2008, which I found utterly fascinating, where he said that Ronald Reagan was consequential historically in a way that Clinton was not. And what he meant is that Reagan himself had changed the ideological trajectory of the country, which had been for half a century on a liberal ideological trajectory. And he changed it almost overnight, which led to a 30-year conservative ascendancy. And I think the evidence of that ascendancy is the fact that smack dab in the middle of it, halfway between Reagan's inaugural and Obama's second inaugural, you had a president of the Democratic Party who declared that the era of big government is over, accepting the premises of the Reagan Revolution, and then abolishing welfare, in fact. So I think he sees himself as the man who will reverse that course. He started it with Obamacare. He's continued it with a stimulus and the ratcheting up of the amount of spending that the government is doing, historically high for peacetime since World War II. I think he sees his next step is to raise the levels of taxation in order that it would meet the levels of spending. Because if you want European levels of entitlements in the country, you're going to have to eventually have European levels of taxation. So he sees himself as establishing the foundations of a more social democratic society. And I think he thinks he can do enough in the 2 terms that will establish that, so regardless of who succeeds him, it will be established. And I think our task as conservatives is to understand exactly what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, to give it a modicum of respect and understanding where that tradition originates, and to say that we think the United States is different fundamentally from Europe, historically and culturally and politically, that we put much more emphasis on the individual, on liberty versus equality. There's a reason that in New York Harbor there's a Statue of Liberty. It's not a Statue of Equality. That we have a sense that when we develop the individual and strengthen civil society, we will emerge with a more free and, in the end, a more equal society in terms of opportunity, openness, and fairness. So I think that's the case we ought to make. We ought to take this task on seriously and to make the ideological, the intellectual argument. And if we do it well and appeal to the more American individualistic tradition, we will succeed. And that's the reason for my optimism, which is sort of independent of who the individuals are who present the case on the other side or here, but we simply have to make the case. If we do, we will win. Thank you very much.